The Tennis Gambling Podcast on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network is brought to you by Fantasy. Get up to 1K in deposit match. Sign up Fantasy promo code SGPN. And welcome everybody to the Tennis Game Podcast here on the Sports Game Podcast Network. It is currently Wednesday night, July 23rd, around 9:40 p.m. Eastern Time. I'm Rosso, Scott Reichel, once again going solo for this pod. Time to break down the quarterfinals in Kitzbuhel and Umag. Said in the last episode we were going to have to punt DC because matches go on very late, and because of that, it was going to be tough to find enough lines to actually record episodes. But anyway, point is we are here to break down the quarterfinals on the clay slate for Thursday. So before we get into the actual breakdown of those matches, a reminder that you can help support the show by liking, subscribing on YouTube. A reminder, you can also find the podcast on Spotify and Apple if you want to get the audio version only. So when you do so, don't forget to like, subscribe on YouTube. Don't forget to leave a rating and review on Spotify or Apple to help the show grow. Plus, a reminder, check out the actual merch store. Because we have a lot of great Tennis Game Podcast merch on the SGPN merch store. We have shirts, sweatshirts, and mugs, high quality, different colors, and also cheap. So recommend getting yourself something there. And for a reminder, the actual network is bringing back the NFL team previews because the Sports Gambling Podcast is back with the 32 NFL team previews. They're also bringing back the phrase that pays. Each episode will have a key buzzword in a 32-word phrase. Submit the phrase for a chance to win a $1,000 circa future. Starting off with the actual recap of what happened in the last episode. Overall decent for the lock and dog. Bit annoyed the dog ended up falling apart there in the third set. Didn't win the lock though, as Wade Comasagna in straight sets at minus 140. Faded Boyer again, who's been terrible, and Comasagna won in straight sets. Nice win there. For the dog, we had Bagnes money line at plus 175. Went for the swing there, and it looked promising. I'll put it that way. Bagnes was up a break in the first set. He choked it, lost in a breaker, won the second set, then had a break lead in the third set. And then, unfortunately, Rinderknech on a game point for Bagnes' service game, clipped the line, and then Bagnes fell apart, and that was on game point. So Bagnes was 1 point away from taking a pretty commanding lead into the third set. Unfortunately, Rinderknech hit a line on the baseline, and then Bagnes fell apart. So picked up a loss there, but I still like the read. I like the price. Rinderknech got the job done, though, in 3. Once again, though, a decent episode. As we split the lock and dog, we'll try to sweep the episode here for Wednesday night. Anyway, getting into the recap of what happened on Wednesday in general. So starting off with the matches in Kitzbuhel. You had some drama early in the morning, and then a bunch of, I'd say, straightforward outcomes, because Rinderknech ended up beating Gambus in 3. Nice job by Gambus, though, to go through qualifying and to win an actual draw match against Gaston. He had not won a main draw match in years. Nice job by him, and he won the first set. But then Rinderknech got the job done in 3. Hanfmann won an epic against Baez as he had a couple of match points that he choked in the third set. Eventually did end up rallying, and I'd say mentally, to get the job done, and he was able to win again in the third set 7-5. But it looked like it was going to be over pretty convincingly in the third set. He fell apart, but then he got back together again, and he was able to win 7-5 in the third. Baez continues to just be terrible, and it's been a really bad run for him. And he almost pulled off a miracle, but he fell short as Hanfmann got the job done in 3. You saw Comasagna, who cashed the lock for us and then immediately lost to Kaza in a competitive straight set battle as he lost 6-4, 7-6. Kaza's been good. Good for him, for the young Frenchman. Struff, though, the only outright we have left, actually, in this event, ended up winning against Martinez in straight sets, 6-2, 6-2. Not surprised. Martinez had not played since Wimbledon when his arm was about to fall off and he couldn't serve against Sinner. Questioned how healthy he actually was. He had just nothing. So overall, once again, you ended up seeing Struff get the job done in straight sets. Dzanchop won, who's on a bit of a good run here, beating Misalic in straight sets. Fought off the crowd atmosphere and ended up winning. He also served for the match earlier in the second set, choked it, but eventually won the breaker pretty convincingly, and he was able to win in straight sets. Shevchenko beat Fuchsovics in straight sets. You saw Bublik continue his great run. I actually misspoke. I said that Struff was the only outright we had left. That's false. We also have Bublik, who I forgot about. But he ended up beating Tarante in straight sets, and you saw Agut lose to Seabold Wild 7-5, 7-5. So once again, you had a couple of dramatic sets. The only 2 matches that did not in straight sets were the first 2 matches of the day. Go figure. But still, should be a fun collection of matches on Thursday. Moving on to Umag, you saw Cerundolo who we will never bet on as the favorite in an event because he's too much of a head case. And he fell apart as he ended up winning the first set. He ended up losing to Burner in 3. A ridiculous third set, for better or worse. Nobody could serve to save their lives the entire set. In fact, out of the 12 games that ended up happening in the third set, there were 9 breaks of serve. 9. You saw, once again, Burner held serve twice, and you ended up seeing Cerundolo hold serve once in the entire third set combined. It was a mess, but either way, Burner got the job done. Cerundolo served for the match, actually, and he choked. But unlike Hanfmann and unlike, once again, Dzanchulp, he could not win anyway, as Burner got the job done as he won 7-5 in the third. Absolute epic. The match itself took about 3 hours and 20 minutes, and Cerundolo could not defend the title as he ended up losing immediately in the event. What a rough loss for Cerundolo. Not surprised, based on Cerundolo's tendency to be a very volatile player. But Burner hung tough, got the job done, but damn, that's rough. Number 1 seed in the event, defending champion. You hold serve 1 time in the entire third set. That's not ideal. But nice job by Burner to get the job done there in the marathon. How much we have left in the tank for the matches on Thursday? I don't know. We're going to talk about it, but the point is a really, really crazy match there. Match of the day, by far. You saw De Jong, who ended up beating Navone in straight sets. Saw Drogic kill Kapriva in straight sets, 6-2, 6-3. Prismic, the local Croatian, ended up getting the job done. Got killed in the first set by Basilashvili. Came back and won the last sets comfortably. So a nice job by him, who's looked very sharp. But then again, we know as a young, I'd say, teen phenom from Croatia, the crowd support's going to be there, and he's been using the crowd to his advantage. But nice job winning a pretty, I'd say, interesting match against Basilashvili in the second round. Darderi keeps rolling. He ended up beating Sang 7-5 in the first set and then bageled him. He went God mode in the second set. Nothing else to add. I didn't think Sang was that bad. Darderi just was unplayable, and he ended up dominating the second set. And you saw Wawrinka, who won a match, congrats, then immediately lost to Dzumhur. Another match where Dzumhur choked it away while serving for the set and the match, and then eventually rallied and won. So Cerundolo is the only guy who got broken while serving for the match and actually lost. But a very weird, I'd say, collection of matches for Wednesday, which I do see mentioned by Johnson, who said it was a weird day. It was entertaining. I'll put it that way. I didn't even mention the DC stuff, which involved Rublev being a head case again and involved Medvedev having a bit of a war there with Opelka. But overall, once again, an entertaining day of tennis in general, and we'll see what happens. So check out the comment section quickly. I see Aaron stopping by. Is Venus a play to get everyone's money? I'll put it this way. I actually didn't even talk about it because I was going to kind of save it till after I went through all the matches, so it actually segues perfectly. So thank you, Aaron. Venus Williams was, I'd say, the main storyline for the last couple of days, who was coming back at 45 years old, and I was going to blindly fade her until I saw the price on Stearns, who was about minus 3,000. And at that point, I said, you know what? I'm good. No offense to Stearns, but I'm not interested. So I ended up avoiding the match entirely for good reason, because Venus won outright as a 14-1 underdog in straight sets against Stearns. Stearns didn't play well by any means, but I thought Venus played very well, at least based on expectation, and she ended up getting the job done there in straight sets. So now she's against Frech, who Venus doesn't know who she actually is, which is pretty funny. But the point is, Venus is going to be... It's really difficult to predict what's going to happen with the public, because on one hand, Venus did pull off almost the impossible and ended up having a massive win as a 14-1 underdog. Do I think the public will be on her? Or do I think they'll just blindly fade Venus, thinking lightning can't strike twice? I think 5.5, you can argue maybe is... I mean, it was a pretty tough 3-set doubles match today, though, which he ended up losing. I think Frech is going to win. I don't see Venus winning this matchup personally. Now, I want to point out, by the way, this is not Venus's last event. She officially accepted a wildcard entry into Cincinnati. So she's not going to retire after this match, so keep that in mind. So emotions might not be fully on display here because she has some tennis coming up in the future. I think Frech wins. I think if I was going to take Venus, it would be the first set. My argument would be Venus maybe starts off okay and then eventually falls apart with the rage and with the heat outside. So it wouldn't shock me if she actually came out firing early on, and then as the match went on, she slowly started to lose her level. So to answer your question, Aaron, as a full cop-out, I'm not taking Venus and I'm not taking Fretch. I'm just going to kind of sit back and watch, maybe jump in play. If Venus gets off to a good start, maybe a live fade at a better price. But for the actual line itself, I'm good. I don't really have much to add for the matchup. But congrats to Venus, who got the job done. And a really hilarious job of the sports books, who took a golden opportunity to get all the public's money on Stearns, because nobody was going to bet on Venus with actual money. You had people who were squares or public people who ended up just betting on Venus for the hell of it. And Stearns was such a big favorite that nobody could actually bet on her. There was just no value to be found at all. So the sportsbooks kind of fumbled the bag on that match entirely. We'll see what happens in that matchup, but I wanted to mention it. So thank you, Aaron, for reminding me. I was going to mention Venus Williams winning a match at the age of 45, tying Navratilova, I believe, as the oldest woman to ever win a professional tennis match. Anyway, look at the comment section here. I see Enigma stopping by. I see Enigma mentioning it's going to rain in Kitzbuhel, so it should be a bit indoors. Yep, definitely is going to impact the actual conditions, but at least they have an indoor facility instead of having it potentially get rained out, which would suck. But either way, a point is looking at the actual comment section here. Enigma also acknowledging that Sarandolo is a joke. I see Goddard mentioning Tiafo being a clown. What else is new? That's pretty much par for the course. But either way, we'll see what happens with Tiafo as he's in the third set now against Kovacevic. But either way, time to move on into the matches taking place on Thursday on the clay slate in Kitzbuhel and in Umag. Before we get into the actual breakdown of those matches, a reminder, they're brought to you by our sponsor, Circa, still hosting the Circa Millions Circa Survivor contest because the world's greatest sportsbook, Circa Las Vegas, is hosting the biggest football contest that you could find for pro football. Circa Million, Circa Survivor, Circa Grandissimo, over $21 million guaranteed prizes. You can't call yourself a true degen if you're not competing in the Circa football contest. Coming out with SGPN at the Circa contest weekend, August 21st to the 23rd, for an amazing weekend, including live shows and an open bar. Plus, you get 15% off a stay at the Circa Hotel with promo code SGP15. Contest open to everyone. Sign up in Nevada, play from anywhere with the help of SGPN's official proxy at footballcontest.com. Use the promo code SGP to get $50 off your proxy fees. We're also brought to you by our sponsor, which has been our sponsor for a long time, Umag Fantasy, because they're doing Best Ball Mania happening all summer long for fantasy football, giving away $15 million in prize, including 2 minute first place. No waiver wire, no arguments about trades. Best Ball is the best way to play fantasy football. Umag's also a great place to play Pick'em if you want to try to win an entry up to 500 times your money. And a reminder, when you sign up, though, for your new account, use code SGPN to get a special pick and reverse that offer up to $1K in bonus cash on fantasy promo code SGPN. Welcome back, everyone, to the Tennis Game Podcast. Finished going through the recap of the matches on Wednesday. Time to move on into the matches taking place on clay on Thursday. So, of course, Kitzbuhel's happening very early in the morning. So we're going to go based on the order of, I'd say, actual match start times, as always. So we're going to go with Kitzbuhel first. Now, for the actual odds in Kitzbuhel, for this one, the first match is between Hanfmann and Rinderknech. Now, Hanfmann's minus 145, Rinderknech is plus 125. For the spread, I see minus 1.5 for Hanfmann, plus 1.5 for Rinderknech, and the over-unders at 23.5. Now, they faced off a couple times, actually, including one meeting in Kitzbuhel a couple years ago, and Rinderknech actually won. So you're looking at what could be an interesting matchup that could go serious distance. It would not shock me if this turned into a marathon. Faced off, though, in Kitzbuhel 2023, and Rinderknech did win in straight sets. In fact, they faced off 3 times. Hanfmann is 1-2. Did win in Bastad 2021, but the point is Rinderknech is 2-1 and did win the only, I should say, the most recent clay meeting and the only clay meeting in this event between the two of them. Now, for the path, Hanfmann's looked pretty good. With the qualifying, did not drop a set. Also ended up beating Neumeyer in the first round, fighting off some hostile crowd, and it was able to beat Baez in 3. Now, for Rinderknech, he's been winning. Has not looked, I'd say, overly impressive, but he's been winning, as he ended up beating Bagnus in 3, and he was down a break in the third, beat Gambus in 3 sets as well. The thing is, I'm picking a very long match and a very, very competitive one. You can argue it's a coin flip. Now, I find the price extremely fascinating on Hanfmann, because even if you think Hanfmann's in better form than Rinderknech, which I'd say in this event fair because he went through qualifying, but the fact is I think that both guys have been pretty volatile with the errors, etc. I think it's kind of nuts Hanfman's minus 145. I understand the argument is, well, he is more comfortable in Kitzbuhel. I mean, Rinderknech made the semis here a couple years ago, but I think you're looking at a situation where Rinderknech beat him in this court previously, and he's getting plus 125. I think it's close. I like the over in the matchup. I think it goes 3 sets. I do think, though, there's value in Rinderknech. Hanfman had an absolute war against Baez. He had 60-plus unforced errors. This match is going to be ugly. If you want to see, I'd say, long rallies that involve high-quality shot making, this might not be the match for you. You might see whichever player commits the fewer unforced errors wins. That could be the matchup you get. I see a marathon here. I like the over in the matchup. I see 3 sets. You might get a final set breaker. But I do think for the sake of the matchup, I think the value is on the dog here. If Hanfman was like minus 120, I maybe can make a case for him. But minus 145 feels so disrespectful to Rinderknech, who I'm not the biggest fan of. But the fact is, he did shut me up. He won 2 matches. And Hanfman beating Baez is impressive, don't get me wrong. In theory, based on name, Baez has been terrible for months, and that was still an absolute war that went, I'd say, to the brink of a potential choke job by Hanfman. I'll go with the dog here. Do I think Rinderknech has value? Yes. Do I think he's going to win? That's once again a coin flip. But I think 145 is an insane price for the favorite here in this one. So for this one, I'm going to go with the dog. Don't mind the over, though. I see a very, very competitive matchup, and I think it should end up being a very, very, I'd say, unpredictable 3 sets of tennis, in my opinion. I see a couple of people in the comments section, by the way. The indoor is still clay, from what I could see here. I'd say when it comes down to the actual conditions in itself, you could argue that in theory it might play faster. With the roof being closed, you don't have any wind element in there, so you could argue that it might actually help the good servers. Then again, we've seen in the event so far, everybody with the match on the line can't serve to save their lives. We've seen a bunch of players choke when trying to serve it out. In theory, when you go indoors, you cut through the wind, you should see faster conditions on clay, but it's still clay, so keep that in mind. But either way, point is, should be a fun match between 2 pretty good servers. I think Rinderknech is the better server, though, out of the 2, which maybe lets him edge it out in a breaker, but I'll go with the over in that one for my thoughts. Moving on to the next matchup. On the card, you have a matchup between Struff and Kaza. Now, we still have Struff to actually win the event and to win the quarter. It's actually a pretty decent matchup for us in terms of stakes. Struff, though, is minus 156. You have Kaza at plus 136 for the spread, minus 1.5 for Struff, plus 1.5 for Kaza. The over-under is at 23.5. Now, Kaza's been good recently. Saw him make a good run, a respectable run last week before eventually falling short to the eventual champion in Bublik. But he's been good. And I think you're looking at Kaza, who is starting to, I don't want to say come into his own, but he's starting to show some of the skills that were, I'd say, being talked about with regard to his upside when he was coming up initially. And he had a decent Aussie Open run a couple years ago, and then he kind of went off the grid. He looks pretty decent right now. So we'll see if he can keep it rolling for this matchup. Struff, though, we know, can be very volatile. He was really bad earlier in the year. Recently, though, he's looked a little bit better. And he has been good in the event so far, not dropping a set yet, as he was able to beat 2 really, I'd say, relatively unknown qualifiers, 2 Austrians. Rodionov's a known challenger guy, but was able to beat him, beat Offner, and beat Martinez. Has not dropped a set yet, so Struff's been rolling, and with the altitude and the speed of the clay, which I know typically results in slower tennis, the altitude and the overall conditions in Kitzbuhel play faster than I'd say most clay courts, and Struff's serve and volley tactics can have some success on the courts here. Now, Kaza wants to rally. He has firepower too. He's been fine. Beat Comasagna in a competitive straight set win. Beat Buse in 3 sets in the first matchup after having the deep run in Gstaad. I think Struff's going to win. I think it's going to be close, though. But I think for the sake of the matchup in itself, I think Struff's serve is more reliable than Kaza's, and Kaza wants to rally. He's going to want to make points longer. Struff, though, has actually been rallying relatively well in the event so far, and the serve here is dangerous. So I'm going to go with Struff here. I think he gets the job done. Maybe it's competitive, maybe get a breaker in there, but I do think I'll go with the Struff minus 1.5 games at minus 120. I think that his serve is the biggest weapon on the court in this matchup, and I think that's good enough for me. Maybe a breaker or two, but give me Struff to win this one while covering the spread for this matchup. Moving on to Bublik against Shevchenko, who is actually going to be the biggest favorite on the board for Kitzbuhel on Thursday. Bublik minus 280. You have Shevchenko plus 225. For the spread, minus 3.5 for Bublik, plus 3.5 for Shevchenko. The over-under is at 22.5 games. Set spread, you have Bublik in straight sets plus 105. Shevchenko to win a set minus 135. The over 2.5 sets is plus 150. Deja vu, though, faced off in Gstaad last week in route to the Bublik title, and Bublik ended up winning in straight sets. Faced off a couple times in their careers, and Bublik is 2-0. Did lose a set in Montpellier last year en route to the title, actually. Or was that to the title, or did he end up losing last year? I'm trying to remember. I want to say Bublik won the title last year in that event, and I think we had money on him. Yes, we did. So Bublik won the title there, and then he also beat Shevchenko and Gstaad, and he won the title there. So apparently Shevchenko, when he runs into Bublik, is just in insane form. But either way, point is Shevchenko is a guy who's not exactly the best on clay, which is documented, but he was able to beat Fucsovics and Galan in the first two matches here. Galan was definitely not easy as he won in 3. Fucsovics had a bit of a rough go of it in the first round. He won against a relatively young Austrian. He wasn't impressive by any means, but he was able to get the job done, and then Shevchenko beat him in straight sets. So Bublik's been rolling. He won in Gstaad, and then he came back and he immediately beat Tarante in straight sets. I think Bublik wins again. I see deja vu from what we saw in Gstaad. I'll take Bublik in straight sets, a plus money. He's randomly become a good clay player. I don't know what happened, but Bublik one day woke up before the French Open and said, you know what if I was actually good at clay? And now he's a good clay player. I can't really explain it, but it's how it worked out. So Bublik, I don't want to say he's going to copy the exact same script that Berrettini had last year, where he shows up to the faster clay events right after Wimbledon and just wins back-to-back weeks. We might be heading in that direction at this point. Bublik looks really, really good, and Shevchenko is not a great clay player. I'm not going to overreact to Fucsovics and how Shevchenko beat him in straight sets. I think Bublik's serve on these courts is dangerous. His overall variety is dangerous, and I do think Shevchenko can be very emotional on court. He tends to let the emotions get the better of him from time to time. I think he's just a frustrating player to play against, Bublik is, and I see that impacting Shevchenko mentally over the course of this matchup. Give me Bublik in straight sets at plus money. Moving on to the last matchup, you have Dzanchop against Seabold Wild, which should be a marathon based on paper. Dzanchop's minus 130. You have Seabold Wild at around plus 110. For the over-under 22.5 games, at minus 120 on the over. The over 2.5 sets is around plus 125. Now, for the path of both players here, Seabold Wild was able to beat Agut in the last match, and he was able to beat Engel, the very talented young German, in straight sets. So he's been playing pretty well in this event. Dzanchop, though, has been good too. Beat Jari in 3 and beat Misolic in straight sets. So look, Dzanchop, we know, can be a talented player. We saw him beat Alcaraz in straight sets last year in the U.S. Open. However, he's also a head case. The problem is the same thing can be said about Seabold Wild because he's also a talented player, beat Medvedev a couple years ago in a Grand Slam. And yet, at the same point, he's also a guy who seems to underachieve a lot, and I feel like you make an argument that something's got to give in this matchup. On one hand, Dzanchop, I think, based on the actual courts in itself with the speed here, you'd argue he might have an edge because I think that he's the better server compared to Seabold Wild. I see a marathon here. I'll go to Dzanchop, but I don't really want to lay 130 with the Dzanchop. I'm not interested. I'll go with the over instead. I think Seabold Wild can win a set here. I think it will be a very competitive matchup, though. Give me the over. Give me a marathon. But I do think the Dzanchop wins. I don't really want to bet that at 130, but I do think if I had to pick one guy, I'd pick him. Give me the over, though. I think 22.5 is a bit short of a number, in my opinion. Moving on to Umag Now, a full disclaimer here, we were missing a couple of lines, nothing extreme. We have money lines for all the matches. Did not really have spreads on a couple of the matches towards the end because we saw a couple matches run late, I guess, on the calendar. But either way, I'm moving on to Umag for the matches on Thursday. Starting off, you have the first matchup between Ugo Carabelli as he ends up taking on Llamas Ruiz. Now, at first glance, the line looks pretty weird because Ugo Carabelli, we know, has been pretty good on clay this season, and he's 51st in the world based on ranking. As for Llamas Ruiz, he's ranked 537th, and he's favored in the match. He's about minus 122. You have Carabelli at around plus 102. For the spread, minus 1.5 for Ruiz is around plus 100. For Carabelli, you have plus 1.5 and minus 120. For the over-under, I see 22.5 games. Now, for the head-to-head, face off one time, which was years ago in Sevilla. So it was in Ruiz's home country of Spain, a long time ago, and Ruiz won in a set and a retirement from Carabelli. Does it matter? Not really. Now, Ruiz is young. He's 22. He's played very well in the event so far, including qualifying. Beat Jacquet, beat Pellegrino, who's actually in pretty good form. Ended up beating Majcik and ended up beating Ottman. So since dropping a set to Jacquet, he's been rolling. Dropped the first set, and he's won every set since. So the fact is he has been playing very well on the courts here in Umag. Carabelli had a very tough match against Pizarro. Got the job done, though. But he was in good form in Bastad before losing to De Jong. And I believe that was the semis. But he beat Garin, beat Dzanchel, beat Misalic, and I know the courts are a bit different here in Umag compared to Bastad. He's been good this season. I feel like it's a very interesting line. You could argue the line is very trappy, that a guy ranked in the 500s is favored over a guy ranked in the top 60. But I do think you could argue that there is some potential value on Carabelli getting plus money when he has been, objectively speaking, a very solid clay player this season. I do think that it's going to be a close matchup, though. I like the over in the matchup. Instead of buying fully into the potential trap with Carabelli, I'll go with the over. I do think Carabelli is a guy who tends to make matches very, very long, and he tries to thrive in that atmosphere. The fact is, though, he went to 3 against Pizarro, dropped 2 sets to De Jong, ended up dropping a set to Dzanchel. He's had a couple of competitive matchups recently that have gone to 3. The thing about Llamas Ruiz, though, is that Majcik, I think, is a pretty good player. We saw him make a decent run at Wimbledon, but I would say that Majcik's been pretty inconsistent over the years. Ottman, I think, is okay as well. I think the Pellegrino win in straight sets is impressive in qualifying. But the point is, I'll go with the over instead. Maybe it is a trap line. I'm not going to bet on Carabelli. I think that it is definitely too sketchy for me to consider. But I do think the over is how I'll go about it. Give me the over 2.5 sets in that matchup. Moving on to the next matchup between Taberner and De Jong. De Jong in this one, decent favor, about minus 250, give or take. You have Taberner at around plus 200. For the spread, minus 3.5 for De Jong, plus 3.5 for Taberner. The over-under is at 21.5. Now, De Jong and a bunch of other guys who made deep runs last week have been looking very sharp, so fatigue's not been a factor in the events for those players, and De Jong has been rolling. Did lose to Darderi in 3 sets in the final in Bastad. Then he was able to beat a relatively unknown Croatian in the first round in straight sets, and then killed Navone in straight sets. As for Taberner, though, he had the epic against Sarundalo, which took 3+ hours, beat Herbert in straight sets in the first round. Before that, though, he wasn't really playing that well. He had a deep run in a challenger a while ago, but for example, in Romania, he ended up losing to Delian, then he lost to Baena in 3 sets in Gstaad. He has not really been playing that well, but I think you're looking at a situation where fatigue could be a big reason why the line looks so big. Because Taberner's been playing well. The problem is when you play 3+ hours with no day off in between, your legs might feel like jello. I feel like that's the problem you run into. De Jong's been good. He's been consistent. And I do think the line makes sense. The problem is, do I want to lay 250 with De Jong? Not really. Do I want to lay 3.5 with De Jong? Not really, but I'm running out of options here. I feel like if I was going to make a case for anything, maybe you could argue Taberner team total under, hoping that eventually he just runs out of gas and you end up seeing him struggle to actually, I'd say, finish out the match with a solid amount of You know what I'm really trying to say here. My concern is Taberner is just going to run out of energy as the match goes on. You can get Taberner actual team total at 11.5 games. I'll go under at minus 112. I think that you can argue even if he wins a set, it is in theory possible for De Jong to win 2 sets 6-3, 6-2. That is a possibility. So I do think you're looking at, once again, a situation where a guy might be fully exhausted, and you might end up seeing De Jong capitalize on that. Give me the team total under for Taberner at minus 112 for the 11.5. Think that Taberner's going to struggle with his energy over the course of these sets. Moving on to the last match. Or I should say the second to last match on the card. Sorry about that. You have Prismic, the only Croatian left in the event, taking on Darderi, who's been rolling off the title in Bastad. He has not slowed down as he was able to beat Sang in straight sets in the match on Wednesday. As for Prismic, he's had a pretty interesting path so far. Had a very good run in San Marino in the Challenger circuit as he lost to Klein in what was the final of the event. Then he came back and immediately ended up making a pretty good run here in Umag as he was able to beat Muller in straight sets and he was able to beat Basilashvili in 3 yesterday. The problem is Darderi's been on absolute fire, and you're looking at the pricing. Darderi on BetMGM is only minus 165, and Prismic is plus 130. I think Darderi should be a bigger favorite. I understand Prismic has the crowd advantage, and I get that he is a player with a ton of talent as a teenager who can be really good someday. The problem is he really has no ATP resume, and Darderi's off a clay title. He won his last set yesterday, or today I should say, with a bagel against Sang, who's pretty good on clay as well. I think Darderi's much better than Prismic, even with the crowd being against them. And I think 165 is a very cheap number. I like Darderi in this one. I saw FanDuel had Darderi to win the first set and the match at minus 110. I like that too. Yes, Prismic is a solid young player, but Darderi's proven he's won multiple clay titles this year. And the fact is, I think 165 is too cheap. I think people are buying too much into the hype for Prismic, and I think you're looking at a good spot to potentially sell high on Prismic. I'll go with Darderi in this one. I think he should be north of $2 as a favorite. I think that minus 165 is egregiously low based on Darderi's current form. Give me Darderi in this one to get the job done, and I do think that you're looking at the FanDuel price, a minus 110, when you throw in the first set and the match prop. I think that's the way to go for this one. Moving on to the final match on the card, you have De Zoomer taking on Droget. Not the matchup you thought you'd get for the quarterfinals in Umag. But for the matchup in itself, De Zoomer is around minus 150. You have Droget at around plus 120. Now, De Zoomer was able to beat Wawrinka in straight sets. He turned the second set into a circus, but he got the job done eventually. And he had an okay showing in Bastad, beat Gaston in 3, ended up losing to Cerundolo in 3. And he also ended up beating Offner in straight sets. So we know De Zoomer is a guy who's solid on clay, not really any threat on the serve, so he has to try to rally in order to win. His serve is very weak, and you're looking at what could be another marathon match here with a couple of long sets. Droget, though, has been very, very good. Kapriva's a guy who I think is a solid challenger-level clay player who's made a couple of, I'd say, marks on the ATP level this season. Nothing that substantial, but he's a solid clay player, and Droget went through him like he was nothing. And he beat Green. I know Green's past his prime, but the fact is he was able to beat him in straight sets. Also went through qualifying. I think for the sake of this matchup, I think the value's on the dog for me. I understand De Zoomer has been looking fine in the event. Wawrinka's well past his prime. It's a win, I'll put it that way. I'm not going to look at that matchup and go, wow, what a performance by De Zoomer. Thought he was fine. I just think Wawrinka's well past washed at this point. And that's all he's shown in the event. So based on the eye test and based on the actual path of both players, I think Droget is a pretty solid value option at around plus 120. I think De Zoomer should be, in my opinion, the favorite. I'd have it closer to a coin flip. I'd have like minus 120 on this one. But you're around minus 150 for De Zoomer because he beat Wawrinka. I just think that line's too big. I'll go for the value. Give me Droget for this one. I think you're looking at a good spot for the dog to once again keep the match close, to maybe find a way to steal it. De Zoomer, though, has not done enough, in my opinion, to warrant being minus 150, minus 155 in some spots. I'll go for the dog in this one. Anyway, that's going to wrap it up for the matches on Thursday in Umag and in Kitzbuhel. Before we get into the actual lock and dog picks for the show, a reminder that we are brought to you by our sponsor, MyBookie. It's available on locations. Use them for, once again, betting on baseball, WNBA, golf, of course. You have football futures and tennis. You'd also use crypto for fast payouts. Use deposit sign up though for your new account. Use code SGPN to get a 100% match up to 1K. Terms and conditions apply. With the DG promo code SGPN. We're also brought to you by Rhythm, who have a brand new feature called Power Trends. They will give you the best props the house model has to offer. I will be fully honest here. I have been tailing their plays on the WNBA, and they've been really, really good. 9-2 yesterday on the Power Trends. I would know because I bet them all. So I appreciate the Power Trends for giving me a very nice day on Tuesday. A reminder, though, Power Trends, though, are only available on Rhythm, so check it out. Overall, great data-backed picks. MLB, win rate is 63%. WNBA, win rate is 63% as well. A 20.7% ROI on Power Trends. And a reminder as well, download the app, check out the Power Trends, start betting smarter. And you can also try it for free for a week, so you know that I'm telling the truth for the actual Power Trends, because you can check it out yourself free for a week. Use the 7-day free trial by going to sportscamppockets.com/rhythm. Get your 7-day free trial, sportscamppockets.com/rhythm to get your 7-day free trial. Welcome back, everyone, to the Tennis Game Podcast. Finished going through the matches for the quarters in Kitzbuhel and in Umag. Now it's time to move on into the lock and dog picks. So for the lock on the show, couple of options here, but I think I'm going to go with my initial thought for the Hanfmann and Rinderknech match, which is a lot of chaos and which is going to feature a longer match. Give me the team total over for Rinderknech at 12.5 at around -110. Now, Rinderknech has won each of the first two matches in 3 sets. He has gone over this number. I believe he had 22 aces against Gambus in the match on Wednesday. So I think he's the better server, objectively speaking, compared to Hanfmann. Fact is, though, he has gone over this number in each of the first two matches. There has been a ton of marathon sets in Rinderknech and Hanfmann's recent matches. Rinderknech has had a 7-5 or a 7-6 set in 14 straight matches, and Hanfmann has had a 7-5 or 7-6 set in 6 of his last 7. Point is, I see at least one set featuring a 7-5 or 7-6 or a breaker in there, and Hanfmann, after dropping a set to Baez and almost punting away the entire third set, with 60-plus unforced errors, I think you're going to see a close matchup. It is worth reminding everybody that Rinderknech beat him in Kitzbuhel 2 years ago. I think the price on Hanfmann's insane. I think if he wins anyway, he wins in 3. I see Rinderknech, though, serving better than Hanfmann in this matchup, and I do think for the sake of the value, when you have 14 straight matches with a 7-5 or 7-6, and you have a 7-5 or 7-6 in 6 of Hanfmann's last 7, and Rinderknech once again did beat him on the courts here 2 years ago, I'll go team total. You might see a marathon. You might see Rinderknech get there while he loses the match. It's a possibility, too. But give me the team total over. I think he wins a set, minimum. And I do think you'll see a 7-5 or 7-6, which is good enough for me. Give me the Rinderknech team total over 12.5 games as my lock at -110. For the dog, I'm going to go to the Bublik match against Shevchenko. Not going to reinvent the wheel here. Give me Bublik to keep rolling. Straight sets for Bublik at +105. Bublik has won 5 straight clay matches. Won the title in Gstaad. 4 of those 5 wins were in straight sets. He's been really, really good. Toronto looked great in his first match, and then Bublik killed him. I think Bublik's serve will play well here. I think that Shevchenko beating Fucsovics isn't really going to change my opinion of him. I think he's a solid rallier, not really a great clay player, and Bublik also beat him in straight sets last week. 2-0 in the head-to-head. I think Bublik will win in straight sets again. I'll keep backing the hot hand. With a guy playing this well, as Bublik has, I got to take him at plus money when I can get it. So I do think you're looking at a good spot for Bublik to once again roll. Maybe a breaker in there, but I think Bublik will do enough with the serve. Shevchenko's serve is really not that impressive, and I do think that Bublik will be able to use the deep return position to keep a lot of rallies, I'd say, once again, occurring during the Shevchenko service games, which can result in a lot of chances for Bublik. I think Bublik will simply put have more break chances than Shevchenko. And that being the case, give me the Bublik straight sets play here at plus 105 as my dog. So once again, the plays here for the quarters in Kitzbuhel and Umag. The lock's going to be on Rinderknecht, team total over 12.5 games, minus 110. For the dog, I'm going to go with Bublik straight sets at plus 105. It's going to wrap it up for the show. We're back once again for the semis in Kitzbuhel and Umag. Till next time, if I'm on Twitter Radio, good luck to all of you and all of your bets. Bye, everyone.